This training video is to help flood wardens collect information about flooding using Fort. My name is Guy Parker and I work for the Environment Agency as a flood resilience advisor. Fort replaces the old SWIM system, which some of you may remember, and it will help flood wardens and flood action groups keep in touch with other agencies before, during and after flooding. Flood wardens are expected to carry out a broad range of tasks: planning, producing community flood plans which may form part of a more comprehensive emergency response plan, offering advice on flooding issues, property protection or the flood warning service to members of their community. Maintenance, understanding what needs to be done to keep flood protection measures working properly, maybe a grip that regularly gets blocked or a bank that's been damaged, and who to speak to in order to get the work done. Research, finding out about historical flooding so that we can learn from the past. Acting as a backup to the flood warning service. This could involve door knocking, a ring round, using social media, or simply putting up signs. Flood reconnaissance. It's important that we record the extent and depth of floodwater and its impact during flood incidents, not just being the eyes and ears on the ground, but raising awareness of the situation with key partners. Looking after the vulnerable, working with carers, social services and other volunteer groups to understand the special needs of vulnerable people during incidents of flooding. Being the single point of contact for outside agencies before, during and after flooding. People sent to help may not be local and will be able to work more efficiently with local support. Being the font of all knowledge on matters flooding in the community. Passing it on from generation to generation. Hopefully it'll be a long time before the next big flood though. To aid wardens in carrying out their task, it makes sense and has been shown to work well if they form groups, usually known as flood action groups. In rural areas, they're generally based on parish boundaries, perhaps grouped as a cluster of parishes. In urban areas, ward boundaries can work just as well. Council employees, if any, may take on key roles. It's not usually a good idea for groups to cross political boundaries, however, as it makes it difficult for responsible agencies to support them. Groups can be linear, working their way downstream, or they may share features such as a school or a type of flood risk, maybe coastal or groundwater flooding. Others may be fledged from existing action groups which were formed to care for the river or from residents' associations. Smaller groups can share a coordinator, much as they may share a parish clerk. They may team up with neighbouring towns. Groups covering a river system often work together to improve the natural quality of the river system as an amenity, its habitat, and the quality of the water. Working as a group, they may bring more weight to bear when commenting on development in the floodplain. Increasingly, they're promoting natural flood risk management. These groups allow skills to be shared. After all, we aren't all geniuses when it comes to IT. And whereas some people are happy talking to large groups, others would prefer the more physical task of humping sandbags about. By breaking tasks down and sharing the load, wardens can work far more efficiently. At the centre of the group, a flood coordinator makes sure that the group work as a team. They have or are assisted by someone with good computer skills. The flood plan should describe who does what and when, but the coordinator makes it happen. There is a role for communications at all stages. They may recruit the public into receiving flood warnings, explain how to protect their properties, or use social media to make their community aware of a developing situation. The flood planner looks after the flood plan. A good organizer, they will consult widely before creating a comprehensive plan of action. The principle of before, during and after is paramount. Flood warden is the key role in this structure. They understand completely the local flood risk, know what measures to take to mitigate the impact of flooding, and perform regular checks to see that everything is as it should be. They are the outward face of the community during flood incidents and are equipped to record what happens accurately and, most importantly, in a safe manner. The Flood Online Reporting Tool, or FORT, has been especially developed to allow both members of the public and flood wardens to report on the impact of flooding on property or their community as a whole. It was designed jointly by Dorset Council and the Environment Agency and is now used across the southwest and at other locations where significant flooding has occurred. Information gathered in this way is used to plan for, respond to, and recover from the impact of flooding. So what is it? How does it work? And what are the advantages of collecting all of this information? Members of the public can produce a flood report related to their own property. This is quite simple to do, so they don't need an account set up, merely access to the reporting form. Flood wardens, on the other hand, produce a record of the impact of flooding on their community as a whole, and so do need to have an account. It may be that a coordinator will do most of the actual data entry, but it is important that flood wardens understand what we can collect and why we need it. Wardens should never create a property flood report without the active consent of the property owner, but they can assist if required. The personal data in Fort is heavily protected. All account holders have access to reports limited by the boundary of their home range. This is usually a parish or group of parishes for wardens, or the district, county or unitary boundaries for council staff. No data is shared without the specific consent of the contributor. Both the property and flood area records form an essential element in the modelling work that goes on to create the EA's flood mapping product, the ground truth, if you like. It's also very important that frequency and impact of local flooding are considered as part of the development control process. Confirmed records of areas prone to flooding can significantly reduce the problems caused by building in the floodplain. The EA's flood warning service depends on this kind of feedback to ensure that the thresholds at which warnings are issued are both timely and accurate. When it comes to access to central government funding for flood protection measures, a benefit cost formula is applied. Knowing what's actually flooded and how frequently makes up a very important element of that formula. In other words, if it isn't reported, it didn't happen, and so it's unlikely that anybody will do very much about it. These are the main functions that Fort offers, although a process of continuous development means that new elements are rolled out from time to time. Property reports. Residents can inform statutory authorities about the impact of flooding on their properties. This can lead to the fulfilment of simple maintenance issues, or at the other end of the scale help justify the development of a full-scale flood protection scheme. Where grants are available, it is used in their administration. Flood area records are designed to show flood impact at a community scale. All of these records can be updated at any time as more information comes to light. Statutory authorities can use other modules to analyse the data, helping with investment and planning issues. There is a map-based dashboard which allows users to view the data spatially, but also has many useful layers such as the flood map, live flood warnings, and it even has an embedded weather map. The Fort team are currently developing tools to support access to photos and videos, as well as a contacts database, which will allow parishes to update their own flood warden details and possibly their flood plans. We're going to focus on flood area records though, because they are the main tool for flood wardens to use. Each record contains a tick box report with spaces to add free text comments, a map to draw the extent, and an option to add photos, videos, or any other type of media. What goes into the report is used by the system to determine which agency should lead, what the urgency is. These reports are frequently annotated by engineers and experts employed by local government, water companies, and the EA. You will be able to see and respond to these comments. Records have a life cycle: current, meaning that the incident is still ongoing; under investigation, the post-event learning phase; completed, no further work is planned, but the form is still open to comment, may be reviewed following any subsequent flooding; and archive. The reports are not deleted, but all personal information is removed after 7 years. The link to gain access to the live version of Fort is on the screen. It should also be on your local authority website. You can select your county or unitary from here. Each lead local flood authority area effectively has its own database within the system, with a few aspects visible across the piece. There is a training site at www.swim.test.geowessex.com. The training site has some fictional data within it, and you can use it to familiarise yourself with the system. But great care should be taken to ensure that you don't use the live site by mistake. It may be an idea to have different passwords. This is the screen that members of the public who don't need to log in will see. When they submit a report, they're sent a reference number and an access code. Using these, they can review and edit their own reports. Wardens can log in at the top right of the screen. Logging in is pretty straightforward. There is a reset password option if you forget it. It sends a new 3-word password to your email address, which you then need to change. The first thing you'll need to do is to name your flood area report. This is important as it will help you and others find it in future. We strongly recommend that you stick to the naming convention: location, type of event or storm name, date of the onset of flooding. As you're logged on, your name is entered automatically. You may be reporting something that looks as though it's about to happen, maybe sharing where you expect the flooding to occur. You can edit this as the situation develops. You can report things that are happening now, happened a few days ago, or even something that happened years ago. Maybe rummage in the attic for those old photos. Ticking the correct button helps the authorities prioritize their response. It's helpful to log any actions that you or the group have taken here. This may include calls made to the local authority, a ring around on receipt of flood warnings, or deployment of property level protection, installing doorway flood barriers or sandbags. There's no limit to the amount of text you can enter here, but if you keep a log, you can upload it with the media upload module covered later in the training. This is the section where you can draw on the map. Currently, you can only draw a single polygon with each report using this tool. To get around this, Fort allows users to upload layers with multiple polygons drawn in a range of GIS tools. Hopefully you can form a group that includes a member who is expert in this field. If not, don't despair. There are other solutions, copying from a previous report or from the EA's flood warning areas. But if all else fails, you can take a screenshot of the map, print it, draw the flood extent by hand, and upload the image in the media module. Council or EA staff will then digitize it for you. Finally, this screen asks you to give your confidence level in the report. This may be especially relevant if it's very old or second-hand, or maybe you had to guess the depth of water. There are other ways to create and upload flood extent polygons, but I'm not going to cover these here. If you'd like to find out more, please contact me or a member of the Fort team, and we will arrange training. We're currently investigating options which would allow flood wardens to collect flood extents, depths, and add photos using an app such as the one shown here called Input. This would allow them to gather and upload data directly from their phones without having to go into Fort at all. A big advantage of this is that you wouldn't need to have a signal, as the data is stored on your device until reception improves. We'll aim to develop field-based training on this when it's delivered, and we can organise groups of people meeting face-to-face again. The next step is to determine what the causes of flooding were in this instance. You can select all that you think might be relevant. Flooding is rarely caused by one single factor. During post-event investigations, one of the flood authorities will work with you to agree on the complete picture. The record can be amended then if needs be. Enter the date that flooding started to occur or the first date of a named storm. Don't get bogged down with numbers. It's the approximate scale of the incident that's required. This will help the authorities determine an appropriate level of response. Record the numbers of vulnerable people affected by the flooding here. You're not expected to keep lists of members of the community who may find it difficult to manage during flooding. However, if there are properties known to be at high risk of flooding, it would be a good idea to agree with residents in advance how they might best be helped should they need it. Homes evacuated. This may refer to buildings that are unsafe due to flood damage or where loss of services has rendered them uninhabitable. Keeping track of where residents have been evacuated to is really helpful. Many will move in with friends and relations, but some will need to be accommodated in rest centres, or more long-term accommodation may be required. Identify the number of properties that have been internally flooded. This will inevitably be a best estimate. Make a note of any properties where the residents are away. The emergency services may be able to enter to limit some of the damage. Properties affected by flooding are those where water may not have entered the property itself, but flood water has caused significant disruption. This may relate to access. If the road is flooded, loss of services such as power or sewerage may occur. Businesses that have experienced an impact on their ability to trade should also be included. Externally flooded properties are those where water has entered the grounds but not caused damage to buildings or an interruption to services. Damage to these still represents a cost to the resident or business, but the response is usually less urgent. This is one of the few required fields on the form, as this is perhaps the most important bit. There is effectively no limit to how much you can say here, but you may find it easier to upload a document describing in greater detail what the impact of the flooding has been. Remember that you can make changes later, but it is important that you get reports in fairly quickly, as cold and wet affects even the sharpest memory. Perhaps a paper log may help. In the Any Actions box, remember to include any of the activities described at the beginning of this video, including passing on any warning messages, installation of resilience measures, and help with vulnerable people or flood patrols that you or the other members of the group have undertaken. This is helpful when you come to update your flood plan in the future, and actions, especially if there is a photo, may be used by our communications teams to promote the fantastic job flood wardens do. The next step is to add any photographs, short videos, diagrams, or perhaps a copy of your log. There is a maximum size of 30 megabytes per file, so a few very short videos are better than a complete production. We can always stitch them together later. It's a good idea to have all your media clearly named with location and date and time. Find a naming convention that works for you and stick to it. You can go back to uploaded images at a later date when you'll be able to add tags or even pixelate out personal details such as number plates or faces. Make a note of who took the images and if they have given permission for them to be shared publicly. As previously mentioned, Fort performs a sort of triage on flood area records, identifying which flood authorities are appropriate based on the response you've made. You can check these here and add or remove them by ticking or unticking the boxes. Active authorities are automatically sent a copy of your record by email and are then able to comment. You'll be able to read all of these comments. Once you successfully save the record, it's a good idea to make a note of the record number. It'll make finding past records much easier in future. At any time, you can go back to your records to edit them. Note the 3 tabs at the top of the form. Flood area record. This is the full record you created. If you edit it, some additional fields are available, including the option to add depths and number of sandbags issued. To add a depth value, click on the Please click here to add one button. This brings up a small map. Now zoom into the location you want as tightly as possible, and then use the slide bar to add the depth. You can repeat this as many points as you like. Location appears as a grid reference, with the depth shown alongside. There are some important notes at the end of this video on safe ways of measuring depth of water, but they are usually taken after the event rather than during flooding. The Media tab allows you to view, edit, and upload more media. Click on the Further Info tab to find out more about the individual item. Here's an example of a document having been added. You can upload your log, perhaps as a PDF, or you may have collected readings from a local gauge board or your own rainfall data, which you can attach as a spreadsheet. The redaction tool allows you to pixelate personal information within the image, such as number plates, house numbers, or faces. In this mode, use the mouse to scrub out the area you want hidden. As the record owner, you'll be able to restore images to the original if needed. A useful feature is the Create Public Upload function. This will allow you to send out a link to flood wardens within a group or more broadly to members of the community. They can use this to upload their own media to Fort. Any images uploaded in this way are automatically attached to your report. You could consider setting a time limit for the link so that it isn't misused after the record is no longer being closely monitored. The hyperlink appears on the form in the Link to Share box. There's a copy icon next to it. Use this and then paste the link into an email, text message, or you could use social media, including a parish council or flood warden WhatsApp group, or perhaps you could use the Nextdoor app to get the message out more widely within the community. Remember to specify where you want to collect the images from and the subject matter though. You don't want strange images from outside your community. You'll be able to delete any you don't think are appropriate. When recipients of your message follow the link, it'll bring up this screen. Contributors will simply have to add their photos or videos here and press Save Media. Fort pretty much does the rest. The History tab allows you to see previous versions of your record. Snapshots are a quick way of viewing historic versions, including the original. It is possible that a lead authority may add to your record, usually in the form of a comment, but perhaps by adding depths or a document, in which case you'll be notified and the version will appear here. If there are any comments, you will be able to see them in this section. You can use this to develop a dialogue with other authorized users. You'll be able to see all flood area records on the map dashboard. They are shown as blue triangles with a colored annotated quadrant which indicates their status, current or archived and so on. Clicking on a flood area record icon will open it up. Property flood records are also visible, but as they may contain personal information, you won't be able to open them unless you reported them with the owner's consent. You can use the date filter to get start and end times so that the map only shows records that refer to a particular event. Down the right hand side are the layer tools. These include such features of live warning areas shown in orange on this map, the flood zones map, local authority drainage assets and so on. You can also change the base mapping to satellite imagery, for example. There is a feature which allows you to identify the postal address of each property as well. This section is about how you can retrieve past records. Obviously, typing in the name or ID of the record recovers them most quickly, but you may want to see reports across a specific time period, in which case use the search by date feature. Filling in more than one search criteria should speed up the response, and you can use wildcards, a percentage sign either side of a word, to find records which may contain a particular word in the record name field. Results are shown in a table. Click the green View button to open the report. A couple of things to note here. 3 of the 5 entries here have never been signed off as complete. You can ask your lead local flood authority or EA to do this for you. It's worth noting that inconsistencies in the naming convention could lead to records being missed in the search. Although you will be able to see what the reports exist, if you research in a wider area, you'll only be able to open those that fall into your community or group area. Speak to your neighbouring areas if you think it would be valuable to look at their records as well. As you can see from this email inbox, a lot of property reports are generated following heavy rainfall. It's worth checking if any have occurred in your area. This might trigger an investigation that leads you to creating a flood area record. The Windy app is now embedded within Fort. It's a truly global weather service which uses bona fide Met Offices from around the world, including GFS and ECMWF, to which our Met Office contributes. It displays a wide range of inland and offshore features, obviously wind, temperature and rain, but it also displays actual radar imagery and runs forecasts out to 10 days, although I would take anything beyond 5 with a small pinch of salt. Your safety is paramount, as is that of the search party that's sent out because you've taken too many risks. Make a checklist and read it before you go out. Do dress appropriately, warm, dry and visible. High vis is the order of the day. Make sure that someone, perhaps your coordinator, knows where you're going and when you'll be back. Call in every 30 minutes or as agreed. Charge your phone battery before leaving. Turn georeferencing on your phone. Note the time whenever you record anything. Consider using a voice recorder or your phone to take notes. Use a headset, but stay alert as it may impair your hearing. Take cards with contact numbers, e.g. floodline, to hand out. Display an ID card from the parish council as well. But don't go into floodwater. It may be fast flowing, will almost certainly be polluted, and we should have a large number of hidden obstacles. Don't take risks. At every change in circumstance, do a dynamic risk assessment. Do I feel safe doing this? And don't get involved. Walk away from confrontation. And don't get distracted. Flood data collection is important in its own right. If help is needed elsewhere, consider if there's someone else who you can call on. Contact your coordinator. What makes a good flood photo? Make sure that the photo has some good reference points in it. Bricks can be very handy for calculating depth, as can features like railings. Rat marks on barbed wire are indicative that the water has been at least that deep, but it may have been much deeper. Consider putting in a homemade gauge board at a place where flooding happens frequently. Take photos from the same spot every time. It may help to mark points and direction on a map you can take with you. Are levels rising or falling? Noting the time is really critical, as we can then relate the impact in your community to a nearby telemetered river level gauge. Above all, stay safe. Thank you for watching this training video for the Flood Online Reporting tool. Changes to our climate are likely to bring about more frequent bouts of flooding. Capturing information now will be of great value to future generations who will be increasingly dependent on the mitigation measures we provide now.